What do you think of Tony Blair standing up today?
Well, I think he had all the charm of a North Korean dictator's information campaign. The people think wrong, we must correct them. Frankly, I think this confirms Tony Blair's total irrelevance in British politics now, alongside the likes of Ken Clarke and Tim Farron and Nick Clegg. We saw a Comrades poll at the weekend that showed 64% of people now don't want to see Brexit blocked. Less than 1 in 4 do. These people are the new lunatic fringe in British politics. They represent very few people. A decreasing number of people think that Brexit should be blocked. Remainers, Leavers together now are looking forward to how we can make a success of Brexit. And I'd just like to bring up one thing that Blair said in particular. He talked about trade. He made out as if leaving the European Union is going to be detrimental to our trade. Well, let's remember what the trade policy of Blair inside the EU is. It's Peter Mandelson having to resign twice from government and being made the EU's trade commissioner. That's the kind of old boys club you've got in the European Union. That's what we're kissing goodbye to. We'll make our own trade deals, thank you very much. It's going to be a bright future for the UK outside the EU. Blair, frankly now, has never been more irrelevant. This speech confirms that.
OK, well, let's talk about unelected figures speaking out. Your former employer has been speaking out today, Mr Nigel Farage. It's not the first time. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Yes, that is man. It's all Tony. The war is over. It's finished. You know, we voted for Brexit. The rest of Europe is moving in the same direction too. I think it's really quite a sad spectacle to see, whether you liked him or not, a great Prime Minister re-enter the political fray on what is clearly a losing ticket.
Right, Michael. So what do you have to say to that? Do you think, you said Tony Blair is irrelevant, do you think it's OK for these unelected figures to speak out if we like what we hear?
No, look, I think Tony Blair is perfectly entitled to have his view, and I think the British people are perfectly entitled to think it's a complete fringe opinion that confirms his irrelevance and diminishes the rejecting Brexit argument even more. I mean, this guy is a massively discredited Prime Minister. He lines up alongside the likes of Tim Farron and Nick Clegg and Ken Clarke, and that's fine. But they represent less than 1 in 4 voters. That's what polling shows us. And I think what we're looking at now is a group of people who really don't even understand the world and the revolution that's going through this country, as if things are going to go back to normal, as if Brexit didn't happen, we can reverse that, as if Trump didn't happen, we can reverse that. No, this is the world now. This is the mainstream. This is the centre ground. Tony Blair, Ken Clarke, Tim Farron, Nick Clegg, they are the fringe. They're yesterday's men. They've been beaten. Their arguments have been defeated. On June 23rd, we had Independence Day. The country is now rallying behind Brexit. These whingers can moan on the sidelines. It won't change a thing.
And perhaps there is a need for that debate, for people who don't agree with what's going on to, as Blair himself argued, that there's an ineffective opposition, and if Labour is not saying it, then someone has to.
Look, people are sick in politics now, being patronised. We've been told by countless politicians, oh, the British public didn't have the full facts. They didn't vote to leave the single market. They didn't vote for border controls. It's absolute rubbish. One of the reasons now I think we're seeing, for instance, the latest YouGov poll has now UKIP ahead of Labour amongst working class voters, is because the stinking, the patronising tone of these people. Oh, if only you knew the truth, if only you were a little more educated, then you would of course change your mind. Summed up by Blair today. This sums up our political system. These people are second-guessing democracy.
Michael, sorry to interrupt. Do you think he was saying that? Do you think he was patronising, or he was just saying that people just didn't have the information at hand going into that vote, and now they've got a better idea of what's to come?
No, look, people are going crazy online if you look everywhere. But Tony Blair telling people that they voted Leave because they didn't have the facts. I tell you something I do agree with Tony Blair on. Some of the facts that were given out during the referendum were incorrect, such as the fact that we were going to go into immediate recession in Q3 of 2016 if we voted Leave. So actually, the reality is, on a lot of these so-called facts that Blair's trying to throw out, if we had the referendum rerun, I'm sure Leave would win by even more of a resounding victory, because we're seeing now the fact that the economy hasn't fallen off, the fact that we can now do global trade deals, the fact that we can now start looking at how we're going to control our borders and look after British workers. You know, there's figures that have just come out, 420,000 extra migrant workers. At the same time as over 100,000 British workers, the number going down. We are seeing a displacement of British workers by migrant workers and a system with open borders that's been a complete betrayal of the British working class at the altar of EU supranationalism by multi-millionaires like Blair, Mandelson, who point their finger, say they've got the wrong result and act as if they know the facts better than the man on the street. No, I'm sorry. This racket, this way of doing politics is dead. Social media, we've seen the growth of it. That's what led to Brexit. It's not going to change. This is the new system. Trump on Twitter. If people don't like it,
little speech that you just did there, but why is it that your former boss, Nigel Farage, said before the referendum that if it was a 52 to 48% result, then there would be a referendum after that, because it means that it was just the start of the war? It doesn't really seem to tally with what you're saying right now.
Complete red herring. Nigel Farage is on multiple times correct this. He was talking about turmoil within the Tory party. Of course, look, you need to start accepting him, I'm afraid. You said today in your piece that Tony Blair is now the most important man in British politics. I mean, you're delusional. You're absolutely. The man on the street doesn't give a stuff what Tony Blair thinks. Anything he says it just discredits your argument further. This guy is yesterday's man. Let's look to the future.
The reason that this has taken place is because Tony Blair now has no competition for putting forward a stark and very clear view on the referendum. Now, that message right now won't have a lot of ears listening to it. I think the assessment that you were making of the polling earlier at about 62% wanting to get over it, that's about right. Over the next 12 to 18 months, as the severity of the implications of Brexit take hold, as people start to recognise it and feel it in their pockets, and yet before we are actually out of the EU, those who hold a very strong line on this matter may find themselves with more credibility and more standing in political discussion than they do right now. And for that reason, yes, now that Tony Blair is prepared to make that unambivalent, very, very clear message, he is right now about to become the de facto non-official leader of the opposition.
We will make America great again.